pleased to have you all here. My name is Tammy Denny, your president for this, our 100th year. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Go ahead, Nick. Comes the flag. On three. 1, 2, 3 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
which it stands,
one
nation,
nation, under
God,
God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Echo, echo, echo.
Yes, so much echoing. Okay, now Nick will put us all back on mute, and that will take care of it. Except me, Nick. Thank you, Nick Williams, for being our IT support today so that Brenna can enjoy the meeting. So thank you very much for that. I want to be certain and acknowledge a couple of guests with us today. Dan from Sitka, Alaska, Lauren's father, who is really just like a club member. He has been with us several times throughout the year, and now he is dialed in from Sitka, Alaska, and he indicated that his background is a rotary construction project. So that's what you're seeing behind him. So welcome, Dan. Everybody do this. Welcome, Dan. And then we also want to welcome Mark Collier. Mark is Assistant District Governor for District 5100. So everybody welcome Mark. Okay, we are now at 71 participants today's meeting. That is so great. So thank you everybody for joining. Bell ringers, Nick Williams will go to you for bell ringers.
All right, thank you, President Tammy, and also thank you everyone that submitted bell ringers this week. It's great to be able to celebrate even though we're not all together. So first bell ringer is from Jessica Ickes. And this goes to those in Indian country who are battling COVID-19 among conditions that in some places can be described as third world country situations. Many reservations and Alaska tribal communities do not have running water, nor do they have adequate housing. Very hard to social distance when you have 17 people living in one house. The Indian Health Services budget is set after all other health and human service budgets and public health services are done and deploys with the Navy. Then the tribal representatives go to Washington, D.C. in February and fight over the remaining dollars to return to their communities. It was hard to get funds and resources in good times. I cannot imagine now. This is not a new battle for tribal communities. We have fought diseases from other places many times. Tribal communities know their past, they know where they come from, and they use that to move them forward, and will do so again into the next new normal. To those that I have worked with and all those that are still working in the Indian Health Service, my thoughts are with you. You're amazing, resilient, and dedicated people. President Tammy, please ring the bell. Next up, we have one from Jen Columbus. Jen is ringing the bell for very thoughtful and creative Rotarians who surprised her with a socially distant birthday serenade and front yard party on Sunday. Thank you, President Tammy, Holly Berry, Farah Etzel, Cindy Linesar, Laura Aguero, Brenda Kidder, and Claudia Vors for making the Sunday morning drive to Independence and making sure she had a birthday that she'll never forget. Thank you, my friends. It was so good to see your faces, even behind masks, and I'm grateful for each of you. Please ring the bell for friendship, creativity, and memorable pandemic moments. Please ring the bell. Next, I'm going to share my screen for Julie Hilty. It might look a little wonky, but this is how we're going to roll. All right. Family Building Blocks is excited to announce the Uncorked Revelry and Uncorked Live, which will combine for the first ever virtual Uncorked event on Saturday, May 16th. If you're looking for a tangible way to support families in crisis, Their benefit auction begins May 9th and culminates into their live stream experience on May 16th, which will support the immediate needs of families in our community. Bid on a BMW X2 donated by BMW of Salem, or win a 4-night stay at a Santiam River fishing cabin with a guided tour for you and your fishing buddies. It's free to RSVP, and everyone that RSVPs will be entered to win a bottle of their commemorative wine and a family dinner from Basil and Board. RSVP on the Family Building Blocks website by clicking on events. Though we can't all be together in the same room, we know we can still connect and do everything we can to meet the new and critical needs of families in our community. Say yes to joining Family Building Blocks and celebrating our community's dedication to families and to each other. Ring the bell for RSVPing today and raising our bids and glasses for children and families. Please ring the bell. And next we have, and finally, Richard Pine is ringing the bell for Evergreen Charitable Trust. Evergreen's fiscal year end is April 30th, so tomorrow will mark 22 years of operations. Over those 22 years, Evergreen, at the direction of its donors, has contributed $2,467,000 to other charitable organizations. Many of the recipients are Salem Rotary Club members, such as Oregon Community Foundation, Center for Hope and Safety, Family Building Blocks, Boys and Girls Club of Salem, YMCA, Salvation Army, Willamette Heritage Center, Liberty House, St. Francis Shelter, Marion Polk Food Share, Gilbert House Children's Museum, and Union Gospel Mission. Wow. Ring the bell for Evergreen Charitable Trust and Community Partnerships. President Tammy, please ring the bell. I know that we also have a few bell ringers from the floor today, so I will, I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone. If you have a bell ringer, go ahead and unmute yourself, and let's rock and roll.
Do you want me to just jump in, or do you want to?
Go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Kim Lemon, St. Francis Shelter. Thank you, Richard, for the reminder. I am ringing the bell for the Willamette University Atkins School of Management Community Grant Program, and St. Francis Shelter received $5,000. And I kid you not, we applied back in January for Chromebooks for kids for education. How's that for lucky timing? So, ringing the bell for educating kids in Salem and for Willamette University Atkins School of Management.
Awesome. Cool. Hey, Nick, I have one. Do you want me just to jump in?
Go for it.
Okay. So actually I have two. So the first one is in celebration and great gratitude, thank you to all Rotarians and all community members who have supported our Cherish the Children 2020 campaign, which we had to launch because we had to replace our auction. We had a goal of raising $140,000 and we're just $15,000 shy. We're almost there, which is really exciting. We are hosting a finale at 4, this Friday at 4 o'clock, a live face stream. So we'll probably be hopefully sending out an invitation for that. But I just want to remind, and this kind of leads to my next bell ringer, which is in honor of Jayne, our speaker today. Violence, family violence, interpersonal violence is just a real reality in our global society, and it plays out here locally. And we have, since the onset of social distancing, we have seen some pretty serious cases of very severe physical injury in our clinic. And so that's something that's really important, that we can be there and provide the right services for those children and their families. And our therapists, just because of the overwhelming support of the community, our 10 therapists are still able to do teletherapy, and they're meeting the needs of all their clients. And so we just want you to be reassured, as your community partner, we're doing everything we can to accomplish our mission. So that's my first bell ringer. And my second one, I've known Jayne for many, many years, and I just want to do a shout out to Jayne Downing and her leadership for the Center for Hope and Safety. Domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, those are really serious, again, global issues that play out locally. And Jayne's taught me a lot. So I just want to do that public shout out to you, Jayne, and thank all of you. You know, these are hard topics for a lunchtime meeting, and all of you are pretty darn, you know, evolved and brave and sophisticated to be able to lean in. So thank you. And President Tammy, please ring the bell.
Do we have any others?
Thank you everyone for your bell ringers. I want to be sure we don't miss anyone. Let me just put your physical hand in the air too. If you're uncomfortable figuring out how to put your virtual hand in the air, I want to be sure I don't miss anyone. Last week, Ozzy was waving away like crazy and I had to scan over 2 screens to find him. And then I found him and he was generous with his bell ringer. So it looks like we've captured everyone. Thank you so much. And in this virtual world, for me, what feels like should be just a straightforward, seamless meeting, I feel like I've lost my groove somehow because I totally overlooked our invocation and words of inspiration. So thank you for your grace and patience as we navigate this virtual world. Renee Campbell, we'll go back to you now, please.
Thank you. A friend of mine, who most of the time is a very positive person. You can hear me, can't you?
Yes.
Okay. Most of the time she's a very positive person, but she admitted to me last week that she catches herself future tripping. So to illustrate how that works, I made up this completely fictitious example to protect the innocent. This is it. My son stayed up late last night. What if he doesn't get up in time and has to rush off to get to his job interview? So then he'll be nervous and he won't be at the top of his game and he probably won't interview well and he probably won't get the job. Then he'll be discouraged and it may affect his confidence on the next job interview. And it goes on until she pictures this child still living at home when he's 50. Well, some might call this worry or irrational fear. In this place that we find ourselves now, it's easy to future trip as we wonder what will life be like post-COVID-19 or living with long-term COVID-19. Many things that we were doing prior to the pandemic may never look the same. During the economic downturn of 2008, Ron and I made the painful and difficult decision to close our business without a good view down the road as to what was next. And I'll have to admit to some future tripping about what's the worst thing that could happen. Well, that all turned out well, and we find ourselves in a much better place now than we were then. And I think we can all relate to times when we were given the unexpected opportunity to change directions. So now, like then, the future is uncertain and we may feel uneasy, frustrated, scared, or down, or all of the above, and it's okay. But we have a choice about whether we stay there or not. One of my favorite positive thinkers, John Gordon, tells us that fear and faith both express a belief in a future that hasn't happened yet. And for me, sometimes it is a conscious, determined choice to believe in the positive option. And making that choice then can affect your attitudes, your actions, and your other choices that often attract to the good things that you are hoping for and working toward. So it's my hope and prayer that for all our future trips, we include a positive faith in a bright future. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. My apologies for overlooking that initially. I apologize. So thank you very much for those encouraging words. I had another set of eyes looking through the group, and Anna Peterson, were you wanting to do a bell ringer? You can take yourself off.
No, I did bell ringers
Okay.
a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, great. And then the other one, Tim Cowan, did you have your hand in the air for a bell ringer?
I did. I wanted to ring the bell for you, Tammy and Nick. It's a
Okay,
great
go
meeting.
for it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was sweet of you. Okay, so Okay, yay. Okay, so all of this wonkiness out of order stuff, so thank everybody for that. We do have a couple of club announcements, one for certain coming from our Assistant District Governor, Mark Collier. Mark, you can take yourself off of mute.
Well, thank you, Tammy. Just to let you folks know that there's a Rotary COVID-19 telethon going to be on May 2nd. And for those of you that have experienced Zoom, now you have the opportunity to experience a live event on Facebook. This is going to be at facebook.com/Rotary. You can also Google it if you need to later, Rotary COVID-19 telethon. Their goal is to raise $1 million. And we did try the Facebook live on our drawing in Kaiser. It worked great. And I hope you folks have an opportunity to sign on and virtually participate in this worthy event. The second thing I wanted to mention is that Tammy mentioned that the International Conference is looking at possibly doing something virtual also. They have, for those of you that had looked towards going there on June 6th through the 10th, it has been canceled. I cannot find anything online talking about going virtual with it, but maybe Tammy, you have some additional information?
My understanding is they're planning to go virtual. President Maloney will put out an announcement here very soon, but I believe the dates were the 20th through the 26th or 22nd through the 26th. So look in your e-blast. We'll get information out to you if you have any interest in participating virtually in the international conference. It'll be a way for you to see a very diverse audience. And I know Sue, our president-elect, sorry that you won't be able to go in person, but I was tickled to hear that they will take that international conference virtual. That will give a lot of folks who won't be able to go in normal circumstances because of a financial constraint, the opportunity to experience it. So I thought that was really worth mentioning. So thank you, Assistant District Governor Mark. Thank you for those announcements and thanks for being with us. Are there any other announcements that we need to make for the good of the order? Okay, then I believe if there's nothing else, I don't see anything coming through the chat or anyone's hand, physical hand or virtual hand in the air. So with that, we'll turn it over. Oh, I did want to mention, remember that we are in this system now until for, you know, at least a few more weeks. And so if you have members to vet, please put them through the normal vetting process. If you have vetted individuals and they've come through the vetting and there are applications outstanding, you might want to follow up with them, get their applications returned. I'm happy to, as we did last week with Kelsey, induct in this virtual environment as long as the sponsor and the member in waiting is interested and willing to do that. We can certainly make that happen. So don't shy away from adding to our membership. If there's somebody that you'd like to vet, do that. If there's somebody who has an application in process, let's get them inducted. So just wanted to be sure and say that out loud. All right, without further ado then, Kim Lemon, you are our program chair. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. It is Kim Lemon, St. Francis Shelter. It is my distinct pleasure today to introduce our speaker to you. I first met Jayne Downing almost 10 years ago, 10 years ago next month, when I was brand new to my role at St. Francis Shelter and executive directoring and social service. Jayne met with me in the very first week. We went to coffee, and after our visit, she offered to mentor me in my new position. And again, that was almost 10 years ago, and I often think that I would not have stuck it out in this role and in this position and with this program had Jayne not been there for so many conversations and sharing her time and wisdom with me in those early years. And what's followed that has been 10 years of conversations and talking through challenges and maneuvering social service model changes and funding changes and celebrating successes and mourning losses and painful things that sometimes come with our work. When the COVID-19 crisis started to ramp up, my first call was to Jayne. And we talked through how we could serve clients and keep our team safe. And I know that many, many other social service providers and professionals in our group here have that same experience. So we are so, so lucky to have her, to have a colleague and a friend like Jayne. And as a member of our club is pretty lucky. We're pretty blessed. So a little bit about Jayne that you might not know, and this is only a little bit, she wouldn't let me say it all. She's been working with victims and survivors of domestic violence, domestic and sexual violence for almost 30 years, and has been the executive director of the Center for Hope and Safety since 1997. He's trained more than 35,000 people on domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking in Oregon and around the Pacific Northwest. When she's not at her desk, she has served and continues to serve on numerous local and statewide task force. She's been honored for extraordinary work with many local and state awards, such as the Peacemaker of the Year Award, the Governor's Outstanding Victim Advocacy Award, and the DHS Saving Lives Award. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you our fellow Rotarian and a friend to all of us, Jayne Downing.
Thank you, Kim. That was a very, very sweet introduction. It's not fair to make me cry before I start talking. Thank you all Rotarians for the opportunity to talk to you about our work and what we're seeing in light of what's happening today, not just to us, but to a lot of nonprofits. I do want to say we are very lucky in this community. We have a lot of nonprofits that work together really well to help vulnerable families. And, you know, I'm privileged to be a part of that coordination and connection with some really wonderful people doing great and amazing things out in the community. The Center for Hope and Safety has been providing services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking for 47 years now. So I've only been around for 30 of those years, but they do amazing work, always have. And I'm privileged to follow in the footsteps of incredible people who built a program that was really strong and able to meet the needs of victims and survivors. And just so you know, at the Center for Hope and Safety, we provide a 24-hour crisis line. We do a lot of safety planning with people. We help them with whatever things they want to talk through. We provide emergency confidential shelter, and those services have continued throughout this. We have had some of our staff working remotely, but there's been a core group of us at all times that have been in the office for people coming in. And then the 24-hour crisis line has continued, the shelter services have continued through all this. And so we have been those frontline essential workers making sure that the community's needs are being met when it comes to victims and survivors. And last year we had more than 30,000 contacts to our program. And I want to be really clear about that. That's not 30,000 different people, because what happens very often is victims will contact us over and over. And so it's, my best estimates is probably that's, you know, around 7,000 different people that are either coming to support groups, contacting us on the crisis line, walking in. Last year we had over 10,000 people who walked through our doors. You can imagine that has changed drastically in this time. Our numbers are going to be very different this year for people walking in for services, but some still are because they know to come here. And so we're providing them with masks if they don't have them. We're doing all the social distancing. We're providing services in a very different way, but we're continuing to provide all of those services. One of the things I think is really important to keep in mind is that domestic violence is a worldwide health issue in and of itself. And it impacts every aspect of our society: schools, businesses, faith centers, and of course the home. The place where you should feel the safest is unfortunately the biggest place that's impacted by domestic violence. And probably you have someone in your family that has been impacted by it, either in the past, or it may be that they're going through it now, and you may not always know what that might look like. And just so I can give a definition, domestic violence is when one person uses control over another person. And so you're looking for a pattern of behaviors. And while it can happen to anyone, and we help all victims, most of the time when we are talking about domestic violence, we are talking about probably female victims. And so the Centers for Disease Control talks about that 1 in 3 women will be victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking in their lifetime. And so we know that even with our 30,000 contacts, we're not reaching everyone that needs our help and support. And so we continue to do a ton of outreach and try to help people to understand what the dynamics are and what the warning signs are. And I want to have you all understand those warning signs because it might be that you realize that there is somebody in your life that is going through this and that you might be able to help them. And one of the things I plan to do in this is to give you some ideas of what you can do, because as Kim mentioned, this sometimes, and I think Allison said, you know, sometimes this can be a difficult subject to hear about, but there are really things that you can do to make a difference. And I apologize for that. You're going to hear that every once in a while in the background. That's somebody coming in, or the hotline may be ringing. So I can't mute that because it's really important that we answer it. So for the warning signs, one of the things that you'll often see in the beginning is someone who is very charming. And you can have a charming person that would never ever think of hurting anyone, but charm is a really huge warning sign. And we often joke around and say, if you meet that person who seems too good to be true, you might want to run. And charm gets used very early in the relationship to gather very personal information about them that they're going to use later on. The number one thing they want to know is, has anyone ever hurt you before? And if that person says, well, yes, you know, I was harmed as a child, or I had a partner who hurt me, the person is going to be outraged and say, who could do that? I would never do that to you. And they think they found someone who's very special and understands what they've been through and is going to be supportive. But unfortunately, once they start to become abusive, they'll say things like, now it's been 2 of us, so it must be your fault, or no one's going to believe you a second time around. And so that charm also gets used on everyone around that person. And so if you think about the times you've seen on national television where someone murders their entire family and they go and they interview the neighbors, you could all tell me what they say. He was such a great guy. I never thought he could do something like that. And that's because they have used that charm on all the people around that victim. So that very often the victim will hear things, if they start to try to talk to someone, they'll hear things like, oh no, that can't be right. That person could never do that. And so that charm gets, it really fools that victim, and it fools a lot of people around that victim. Another huge warning sign is isolation. And how we see this most often is social isolation. Over time, the abuser will say, you don't get to be around your family and friends. I don't like them. They don't like me. And so the person becomes very socially isolated. You can also have geographic isolation, being moved to a whole different state where there's no friends or family, no resources that they know of. And they also can be moved way out of town. And so there's no neighbors around, no one's talking over the fence, or they move around a lot from community to community. Another warning sign is jealousy. Abusers will very often make accusations of infidelity. If they go to the grocery store, they're having an affair with the grocery clerk. They go to the gas station, they're having an affair with the gas station attendant. The reality is most victims don't have the time, energy, or interest in having any affairs, but there's constantly accusations of those affairs. Another huge warning sign is emotional abuse. In the beginning, they were charming and wonderful and loving and caring, but over time, they'll start telling that person, you don't look so good, you're not taking very good care of yourself. They will start to call them names, put them down, and the goal of it is to annihilate their self-esteem, to no longer have them believe they're good enough or that anyone else could ever love them. And this is devastating. You think about if you have a healthy relationship right now, one of the most important things is that that person loves you more than anyone else in the world. They think you're great no matter what, and they tell you that on a regular basis. But think if that person is supposed to be the one that tells you all those wonderful things and instead is telling you you can't do anything right. And so that over time that annihilates a victim's self-esteem. And so they begin to actually believe what the abuser says. And because of that isolation, instead of hearing from people, you're a great and wonderful person, you don't deserve to have this happen, instead they're hearing things like just that abuser's voice in their head. And so it takes a lot to overcome that, because again, this is supposed to be the person that loves you more and cares about you more than anyone else. And the last warning sign is control. Over time, the abuser is going to control everything about them, where they go, who they see, how they dress. And they absolutely believe they have a right to have that power and control over the other person. I want to transition to how those tactics get used when you have a situation like COVID-19. What we see is that two of their tactics, fear and isolation, fit very nicely in with sheltering in place, unfortunately. We have heard from victims of the fear, not only that they're inducing of, I'm going to harm you or I'm going to harm the children. They also use the fear of you're going to get sick if you leave here. We had abusers that have actually done things to try to threaten their health. They will go out and do things that are risky behavior and then come back and say, I'm going to give you COVID-19. They're not allowing victims to wear masks themselves or wash their hands. They're trying to do whatever they can to keep victims in a very vulnerable situation. And while sheltering in place has been a good thing for, helping to slow the spread of disease, if you think about it, it isolates victims from all the places where they really can get some support: their family, their friends, their faith community, work. There was a survey that was done that said, where do you feel the safest? And victims said work and church. Were the two places that they felt safest. And right now, those are not typically available to them. And so COVID has also kept many victims away from social service agencies. And some have closed down. Some are only doing certain types of services. We heard from many survivors when we had to stop doing our support group because we would have 15 people in the same room. 15 women for support group, and we couldn't have it done that way any longer. And so we're certainly looking for other ways to be able to provide that, but that's been a loss for those individuals that had been coming on a regular basis and getting help and support in person. So what we know is when the world feels out of control, when you don't know what is going to happen, very often victims will stay home at first. And we saw it at 9/11. We saw it when the H1N1 crisis happened. All around the world, you hear about it. You can read about stories about domestic violence, victims hunkering down when there's hurricanes, earthquakes, other natural disasters. And because our program had experienced that before, and we knew that our hotline would get quiet, eerily quiet right at first. When you think about those 30,000 contacts, that's about 50 a day. And it feels so odd to have all of a sudden there's not the calls coming in. And then what we knew was that that would change when things got back to normal. And right now, nothing feels quite normal, but you know, we had prepared our staff to think about, you know, it'll get quiet and then it's going to eventually pick up. What I can tell you we were not prepared for was that it happened, things changed very quickly and very dramatically. And you may have read in the newspaper about huge spikes to hotline callers on fearing domestic violence, that they were calling in lots of different places, and that their numbers had spiked. That did not happen here. Our calls actually didn't increase that much over what we had had the year before. What did increase drastically was the requests for emergency shelter. And so we actually received double the number of requests for emergency shelter than the year before. And when this all happened, our shelter was actually at capacity. We had all of our beds were full. We had 13 children in one house, which made life very fun. And so we scrambled when all this happened. We brought in extra food. We took care of those families in every way we could. We provided masks for them, all kinds of disinfectant cleaners, everything. We do deep cleans in shelter on a regular basis, and we just tried to do everything we could to help them. We also tried to do everything we could for the children, providing them activities and different things they could do. We had to do it in a different way where nobody was touching anything of anyone else's. And so we provided all of that for them just to try to make it as easy as we could and take good care of them. We continued to provide case management for them. But what happened when those calls to the hotline increased so dramatically for emergency shelter, we couldn't bring them into our shelter. And so we started having to try to figure out, you know, what can we do? And we have a limited amount of funds for motel rooms in our budget. Typically, we will have maybe 1 to 3 families a month in emergency motel rooms. And over the last 2 weeks, we have had up to 14 families in motels at one time. The dynamics of domestic violence are such that we could not turn them away. If we said to them, you know, sorry, our shelter is full, that would have meant the only option for them would have been staying with that abusive partner. And that was not something that we ethically could live with. And so even though our budget, we had no room for it in our budget to do that, we made it happen. And we provided all their food, all their cleaning supplies, masks, everything that they needed, activities for them and their children, so that, you know, because being in a motel room sounds fun, but it really isn't if you're in hiding. And so we have just scrambled to be able to provide everything that is needed and to keep up with the demand. But for us, it was a matter of we can't say no when lives are at stake. And if you've been following the news, you've seen there has been a spike all across the country in domestic violence, homicides, suicides, including one that happened in the Eugene, Springfield area just over the last couple weeks. And this is what terrifies all people that work in the field that I do, is that time when someone will be murdered because they don't have another option. And murder suicides are unfortunately not abnormal for domestic violence. And if you think about it, it makes all kinds of sense because it's the ultimate in power and control. I'm going to take someone away from you, your family, your friends. I'm going to take them away, and no one can hold me accountable for that. And so, unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that we're working to prevent by having so many people in the motel. The other thing that was really different for now is we try to make motel stays very temporary. We try to do everything we can to be able to bring them into shelter as quickly as possible. But we knew we had to make a commitment that for as long as they were going to need that, we would be providing that service. And but what we did do, and this is the good news that I want you to be able to hear in this, is our staff worked really hard to be able to find alternatives for people. In that first week that all this happened and our motel stays were spiking, we had staff that were able to get 3 families into another location, get them to another state. And that was while everything was being closed down and transportation was difficult. We were able to get them to family members where they could be safe from their abuser. And we also got people into permanent housing during that time, which was shocking to me. I thought, oh, this is going to be really hard. And I know Kim's program has had some success with that also, and some other nonprofits have talked about this, that we've all been kind of surprised by that. But that's a wonderful surprise. That's an incredible thing to have happen, where we know victims can get to where they need to be, they can get stabilized, and we're doing all the case management with them to be able to find those alternatives and to be able to help them. We know that leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time for them, when they're either attempting to leave or just when they first left. And so these services become even more critical to be able to do that. And since we don't know how long this is all going to last, we're continuing to try to find those alternative places for folks. But we still have, right now, we still have 10 families, because we have more coming in. And the really hard part about this is that this is going to go on for a while, because we know that this has only just begun. When the shelter in place order is lifted, we know that a lot of victims will probably make their move. And so we have been working not only with the motel clients, but our shelter clients to free up space. And so we've gotten some of them into housing. We've helped some of them move to a safer location. So now we're bringing motel folks into our shelter. So we're going to continue to do all the things to try to protect their health and their well-being. But we know that that's the best thing to do, is just to continue to keep working with them and providing those places that they need in order to be able to get out and to get what they need. This domestic violence sometimes creates some very unique barriers. Very often the abuser will take their identification, will destroy their insurance cards, things like that. And one of the things that was put in place with all motels was that they couldn't come in without identification. And that was actually to help victims of human trafficking. So motels wouldn't be just taking, blocks of rooms, renting them out, not knowing who was there, and individuals were actually being trafficked. That was wonderful for victims of human trafficking. That has been very difficult for victims of domestic violence, because that's one of the big things that abusers do, is take their identification. And so we have been lucky enough to work with some motels that have been very kind to understand and allow us to do protect the confidentiality of those victims. And we are so grateful to those motels that do work with us in that way. So the majority of people that are at the motel don't know this is a victim when they come in. And so we're really thankful to have the ability to be able to do that. And we know that that can make a difference for them. We're going to ask all of the Rotarians on this talk today not to talk too much about the fact that we put folks in motels. If you've been kind of following what we've put out publicly, we've tried not to talk too much about where they are going because it's incredibly difficult for them. They may have their abuser start looking for them at motels. And so we kind of have to keep that on the down low. I think that's really important for you all to understand how this has impacted our community. But it really is important that we try to keep that kind of that veil of secrecy that a lot of times folks feel like we have around our program anyway, but that's for a very good reason. It's to protect all the families that are coming to us and needing to get that help. And so I want you to know that, you know, there are things that you can do. And a lot of times people will say, well, I feel like there's nothing I can do about this issue. And there's really some very important things that you can do. And I'm going to save lots of time for questions because I want to hear from all of you, but I want to give you a few ideas. One of those is getting informed about the dynamics of domestic violence. Very often when we do trainings with people, one of the biggest things we hear is, oh my gosh, I'm able to put together a situation that I've always wondered if it was. And now that I really fully understand those dynamics, I really can see that and I can know what I can do. And so our website is full of great information. It's at hopeandsafety.org. And you can check it out and just read through it. It's very simple to be able to read. And another thing that you can do is if you have an old cell phone, I know a lot of folks have been cleaning out and right now we can't take donations, but if you have cell phones that you are no longer using, we give those out to victims and we give out hundreds of them every year. And we're actually low on cell phones right now. We did a plea on Facebook to get some phones that actually had some minutes and we got some of those, which is such a great gift. And we just gave one of those out yesterday to a victim that had not been able to connect with any family members throughout this whole thing because the abuser wouldn't let her use the phone. And she started crying when she got that phone because she could reach out to her family and she could talk to them and be able to get the help that she needed from them because she knew that they would want to support her. So she's going to be quickly moving on from the motel because she's going to be able to connect with them and get the help and support that she needs. If someone you know is being abused, a lot of times I get the question of how do I best help them during COVID? And one of the things, if you have a chance to talk to them, what's most important about that is to take your lead from them. If they say to you, if you make any kind of contact right now, it's going to place me in greater danger, I want you to listen to them, even though it's hard. That's one of the hardest things that family members, friends, coworkers sometimes have to do is to have to listen. But that person knows what the safest thing is for them in that situation. And if they believe it's going to increase their danger, even though it's going to be hard, you have to do that. If you can put some things in place with that person that could help, if you are able to text that person, and I wouldn't text and ask this question, but if you get a chance to be able to have what you know is a confidential conversation with them, is there an emoji that they could send you that would give you the message of, I need you to call 911, or I need you to reach out in some way? You can talk about that in advance, and then you will know what that signal means, and it won't be something that the abuser, you know, if they're normally able to text with you, the abuser won't likely know what that means. And so, you know, it can be a verbal code word while you're talking. It has to be unique enough that they're not going to, you know, it wouldn't come up in everyday conversation, but not so unique that it would make that person suspicious. But it can be very valuable to kind of know you still have that connection. And that actually is the most important thing you can do, is in any way you can let that person know that you believe is being victimized. We're going to be here when this is all over. The abuser, chances are, is telling them, no one's going to be here when this is all over. I'm the only one that's going to be here for you. And if you can give that message of, no matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, we're going to be here for you. It doesn't mean that you need to take them in. It doesn't mean, we don't want you to put yourselves in danger in any way. You can, you know, they can work with us. They can come to us and stay with us if they need that help and support of a shelter. But if you, even just that emotional, remember part of that social isolation piece, you're helping to undo part of that by saying, socially, we're going to stay connected with you in some way as long as you are willing to stay connected with us. And I don't want you to think that it's not important. It is. It's incredibly important. We tell people all the time, the most important things you can say to someone is, I believe you and it's not your fault. And it sounds so simplistic, and yet we hear from victims how impactful that was to hear that from someone when they, you know, when they were feeling as though no one was going to be there for them or believe them that this was happening. So I want to wrap up by saying thank you to all the Rotarians that have supported our program in big ways and small ways. We've been the recipient of some wonderful support, and we are so, so grateful for that. We have folks doing some simple things. I reached out to a few businesses and said, do you have pins? And Brenna helped us with pins. Bliss Sequoia helped us with pins. Because if you think about it, when they're coming in, we don't want to be passing a pin back and forth. Seems like a really simple thing, but it does make a difference. And we're trying to really think outside of the box and think of ways that people can help us in really different ways. And I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jayne. Thank you so very, very much. Now, everyone, remember, if you go along the bottom of your screen where it says participants, find your name and put your hand in the air if you'd like to ask Jayne a question. That'll be the easiest way for me and Nick to find you. Okay, so Nick, did you happen to notice who was in the queue first?
Yep, we've got a question from Warren. Warren, you are unmuted now.
Okay, Warren.
Actually, it's me. Hey, Jayne, I want to say thank you so much for your great partnership. Your staff did partner with me recently with a client, and it was very helpful. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, I know one of the things that can be a very protective, helpful thing for victims is to get a restraining order. It is a process. It's kind of a daunting process from my understanding. And I was just wondering particularly during this time period too, if you could share a little bit about how that process can work and how you guys can help people with that.
Sure, thanks, Linda. I appreciate that question. And the restraining order process can be daunting at times. At the best of times, there's a lot of paperwork, and we help people with that every day. We have a court advocate who goes to the court and actually assists people right at the court. Of course, with what's been going on, we haven't been able to go to the court, but we're doing creative things. The court is actually putting victims that come in for protection orders, putting them on the phone with our court advocate. And so they're actually still continuing to get that service. The court, that is one of the few things that the court is continuing to do, is protective orders. Again, those need to be, the victim needs to think through if a protective order is really the best thing for them. If they want to flee the state, they don't want a protective order in place sometimes if there's children, because part of that may be a requirement that children have visitation. And so it could, you know, put them in the position of having to make the choice of breaking up a court order, and judges don't like it when you break their orders, and I'm guessing Judge James can back me up on that. You know, so it's something that we can talk through with them, figure out if that's the safest thing for them to do in that moment. But we absolutely are finding different ways to be able to do it, but we're continuing to do those protective orders with people.
Great. Thank you for that question, and thank you for that answer, Jane. Linda Wooters, I believe you're next in the queue.
Okay, let's see. Do I unmute?
No, Nick.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you, Jane. As usual, my goodness, the good work you do. On a practical level, can you let people know what you do with your donated phones as far as wiping them and so forth?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we make sure that they are not holding any personal information before we ever give them out to someone. Even if your phone doesn't work, you can donate it to us and we will actually recycle it appropriately. And so you can trust that when it comes to us, you don't have to worry about any of your information going out to anyone else. So thank you for letting me clarify that.
Great question. Ron Kellerman, I believe you're next in the queue.
Thank you. So this is just slightly a sideways step to what you've been speaking about, Jane, but aren't you also involved with the old Greyhound bus station? And if so, what is the status on that?
Yeah, so Ron, thank you so much for your support, number one. And we have a dream. We bought the old Greyhound bus terminal, have torn it down. We want to build low-income housing for survivors. Our dream is that we can see folks past that initial in crisis step and help them become stabilized, provide all kinds of wraparound services because it'll be connected to our building. Our advocates will be working with them to take them that next step for, it's gonna be a mix of transitional and permanent housing. It was gonna have businesses on the bottom where they could, they would partner with us, and so doing services in a very unique way. That's still our dream. But we know that that it might be delayed a little bit. That's heartbreaking for us. We were hoping to break ground next year and be open in 2022. I haven't given up the dream. Amazing things happen in our community, but it may not be quite as quickly as we had hoped. But the good news is we have no debt on that. We have paid for it every step of the way, and so we aren't carrying a burden of debt if it takes us a little longer to be able to do it. But it's still our dream, and if you know of anybody that wants to, invest in some affordable housing for survivors, please send them our way. We'd love to talk to them.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Ron. Sue Bloom, I believe you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Jane. You are just a rock in our community, and I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. So obviously a highly stressful profession for you and for your volunteers and your staff. What do you do as individuals and as teams to kind of just take a deep breath and support each other, take that stress down?
Thanks, Sue. I appreciate that. And thanks for our partnership with you all. We love being able to work with you. A lot of our children benefit from the Boys and Girls Club. So we actually have always done a lot of work around self-care. We know that we can suffer with secondary trauma doing this work. And so that is always a huge emphasis of what we do. Right now, some of our staff are working remotely because social distancing, we started out with 5 or 6 in the office. Now we're up to, I think we have 15 in the office right now because we just took off and there was so much that needed to be done. We had to have people here, but we're doing all the physical distancing, the masks, the disinfecting, all those things we've put in place to be able to protect our staff and each other. But we continue to support each other. When this first happened, we did a self-care kit for our staff and delivered it to them and they loved it. We did all kinds of, you know, exercises they could do, breathing things. We send things out constantly to them to say, here's another tip for how to care for yourself. You know, there's some really great things out there for, you know, how to take care of yourselves. It's just stressful in the, you know, in the community right now. It's you don't know what's going to happen. And so we talk together constantly. We support each other just as we did in the office, and the folks who are here. It's very much a supportive group. I will tell you, we haven't lost any volunteers in this, which just is amazing to me, that they've continued to help us with the hotline at night. And, you know, they've just been rocks through all this. And it's incredible to see. So we're incredibly grateful. And we put some things together, and if any of your staffs need those, please let us know, and we're happy to share anything that we've done.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. I don't see anybody else with their virtual hand in the air.
We do have one more, Selma Pierce.
Okay, Selma Pierce, please go.
Is there any kind of preventative program for teens so that as they mature and develop relationships, they know what to look for or what raises a red flag for them?
Absolutely, Selma. That's a great question. We actually have a youth advocate that goes into the schools, and she provides 4 sessions to all the students in every school that asks us. Either the school counselors or the health teachers usually bring her in, and what she does is she actually trains the youth to talk to other youth. Most youth aren't going to talk to adults. They're going to talk to each other, and so she trains them on how to, if their friend says to them, this is happening to me. She talks to them about teen dating violence. She talks to them about sexual assault. She talks to them about human trafficking. How do you, you know, if you're approached by a trafficker, or if you're seeing warning signs, how do you deal with that? And then she also talks to them about the dangers of pornography, which always amazes me that we're able to talk about that in the school, but it's a really important topic, you know, to understand the dangers of sexting and those, you know, social media pieces. Unfortunately, abusive people are out there trying to make contact. And so we do thousands. We typically train between 3,000 and 4,000 youth every school year. And we're going to have to figure out a new way to be able to do that. But we will continue to do that because we believe it's a very, very important part of our work.
And I believe Tim Cowan, you're trying to get my attention. So Tim, if you have a really quick question, we're going to run out of time. So go ahead, Tim. Just a moment, let Nick take you off of mute, or you need to take yourself off of mute. We can't hear you yet, Tim.
If it was about his chat he sent me privately, I'm happy to follow up with him about that.
Oh, okay. So did you hear that, Tim? Jane's going to follow up with you about the question that you sent her via chat.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that the 3 people that I knew that were abusive, I didn't like them.
Okay, good.
I had to know ahead of time because they were always negative. They always overreacted to anything that we were talking about, but worse, they were indifferent.
Yeah.
No matter what the topic was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's thank Jane for being here and being our speaker today, even though she's our very own and we love her dearly. So Jane, thank you so much for being with us today as our presenter, not only as our fellow Rotarian member. I owe you a challenge coin when I see you next, so I will get that to you when we have the opportunity to be face-to-face. Wanted to ask a question. Who is Jay Mung on this? We have a person that is with us today, and the initials JMMUNG, and we do not know who you are. So
I think that's Jill Munger.
Is it Jill?
I invited her to come to Rotary today.
Oh, okay. So we probably should have had an introduction. My apologies, Cindy, for not introducing guests. So
that's all right. We didn't know we made it.
Okay, great. All right. So we have a guest. Jill, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Cameron, I believe you're also on the member waiting list, so we'll get you inducted when we can get that organized. So Cameron's also with us today. Everyone who is with us today, you do not need to go to DACDB and record your makeup. Holly is recording attendance, and so this will be the attendance report. We have recorded the meeting. We will put it on YouTube. So any of the members who weren't able to be with us today can watch the YouTube video of the presentation today, and then they can record their makeup. But no need for you to do that. Holly asked me to make that announcement today. Dan Jones, thank you so much for being with us. Mark Collier, thank you very much for being with us. It's so great to have you both. Next week, we will, of course, once again be in virtual mode on the 6th of May. It's hard to believe that it will be May next week. And the virtual meeting, Renee Campbell will be our program chair. Thank you, Renee, for taking that lead. And Norm Murray is going to be our presenter. He is from the Rotary Club of Tualatin, where he served for 25 years in the Marine Corps, shuttling Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter as a pilot of Marine One. He'll share some of his experiences, including those from Camp David, where he spent quite a bit of time during those assignments. So that will be interesting and a kind of a course shift from where we've been these last 3 weeks. So I believe that's everything for the good of the order for today's meeting. Did I miss anything in this kind of awkward place? I can't see all of you at once, but I love you, appreciate you. Thank you very much for being here. Blessings to all of you. Have a fabulous week, and I look forward to seeing your beautiful faces in a week. See you then. We're adjourned.